Now, go for it, Nate.
Are we now? Okay. I don't ever see any sign that we're live. Oh, there it is.
Yep. We're live.
Okay.
Hello, everybody.
So, hello, everybody. So, today we're going to be talking about the epic, heroic movie from India, fresh from Bollywood, called Baahubali. Um, like so many, like so many epics nowadays, it was divided into two parts. And I actually found out about it when I was looking at some blogs, and somebody had posted some gifs from this film. And I was just, and if you've seen it, you can probably guess what some of the scenes people were showing off. And I was just like, oh, this looks insane and hilarious. I've got to watch this. And I'm a part of a movie group, and we decided just to do a foreign film month for fun. And I said, oh, guys, we just got to watch this film. I don't care. This is going to be great. And then after we started watching it, it's like I started laughing with the movie, not at it, and going like, "Oh, this is awesome!" And then I started recommending it to everybody.
Oh yeah, it's a pretty awesome movie. Like I can only watch the first half of it, but I've been like browsing the YouTube for like cuts of it and various fight scenes and whatnot, and like every single time, it's like epic, topping, awesome fight scenes, great character drama. Like some of it's very, very, very strange, from our Western perspective, but a lot of it is just very good.
Sorry. Stop. There we go. Sorry about that. I don't know if that came over the mic or not. Yeah, so it was Nate who got me interested. And before I had a chance to watch it, like you guys, I was looking around on YouTube and I watched the. I'm going to put this over here in the chat and then hopefully it can get put wherever the video is actually being put up on the website or whatever. I started watching it's one of the early songs and it gets towards the end. And up until that point, it was kind of like a Bollywood movie and a little bit like a fantasy. And then there was a scene, and I'm sitting there with my mouth open going, okay, that's a Prince of Amber level action. Like, that's the kind of things that we play Amber games to do. You know, from that moment forth, I was completely hooked on the idea of seeing this movie, and it got even more amazing as you continued through. But one of the reasons I liked it is I was thinking, this is what whatever you want to call the guys who are Highlanders, Princes of Amber. We call them Great Race members because that's what they were called in the game we played. The guys who are just larger than life. This movie shows you the kind of things they do. And it's just astonishing and yet really well done. And John and I just really enjoyed it. We watched the first one, we loved it. And then the second one was really amazing because it was both action but also had this deep storyline that reminded me just a little bit of the Mahabharata in that there were, the sins of fathers reflected in sons and other themes like that you see in the Indian religious works, and I should say that this is not actually a Bollywood movie, it's a Tollywood movie. It's not the normal Indian guys, it's a different language group, but it has a lot of the same type of qualities as Bollywood movies. So from our Western eyes, it's a Bollywood movie, but it has a different language than the I guess the normal ones are Hindi. This is something else.
I think.
Well, I think it actually has two language versions out there.
See the scene there, the one where he's diving off to shoot a bow through a tree, and he's going to die if the boat does not, land properly and allow him to climb up. At that point, I went, okay, this is no ordinary guy, It's just, and one of the things that makes it really cool is that everyone else is an ordinary guy, and or most of the characters, and he's not so extraordinary that he's like Superman, you know what I mean? So you really feel how amazing it is. Anyway, I just want to say that because the scene was in the background. But go ahead.
Well, in our group, we made the joke that Batman reads Baahubali comics. So,
yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, I can believe that too. Even though I've seen a lot of scenes from the second movie, and I keep finding more and more and more. And it's like the first movie is all the setup, all the history of it, and it ends with this great fight scene against some unruly horde. Um, where the two brothers compete against each other to see who can take the head of the enemy king first. Then it's just like epic, 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 and it's like, oh man, I don't see this sort of epic outside of Lord of the Ring movies. The Peter Jackson ones. And it's like, ooh, so good.
And the scene where the brothers are competing, for a setup for people who haven't seen it, there's a war, and the mother has said something like, she's going to give the throne to the guy who gets the head in first or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And she's in charge. And they're going out and they have like these chariots of death that looks like one of them has it's like something out of Labyrinth. I mean, it's like this wheel that's just throwing people as the chariot moves forward. And it's just the kind of crazy things that like guys want to think up in role-playing games, or that you see. It's over the top, but like you say, laughing with it. You're so delighted with the whole mood that it doesn't seem stupid or corny. It just seems fun. And so each step, and the one thing that wasn't clear to me that I wish had been clear was in the first movie, he meets this girl and she's with these people who are living in the middle of nowhere. And only in the late part of the second movie did I realize that those guys are in the second movie where they're like living in a kingdom, and they were like a prince and his people and stuff. And I think that that old guy in charge of them, who I thought in the first movie were just like some hill bandits or something, I think he got killed off before I realized, oh my gosh, that's him. That's the prince from the other kingdom, So I just wish there'd been a little bit clearer on what was going on with that secondary plot line there. But that whole thing was really cool, and you have to kind of piece it together as you see the first part of the movie, and then how they came to be in this horrible circumstance and stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, and it's kind of at least watching this, I can start to see like how Transformers and some other American movies end up becoming so popular in other nations, because I'm sure some of them are just going, what is going on? This is crazy. But I certainly liked it because kind of looking at everything from an outside culture perspective, I was kind of noticing lots of little hallmarks of the writing and certain commonalities to, how everybody tells stories that I was really enjoying. So, in the movie, because I know there's been a lot of debate over this, Baahubali, is on paper like a Gary Stu. He's stronger and smarter than most, but what keeps him from being what makes him entertaining, whereas other examples are annoying, is he has challenges that are that rise to his abilities. So he doesn't have to just climb a mountain. He has to climb like the tallest, highest mountain that's ever been. And, he doesn't just fight armies. He doesn't just fight men. He fights armies and, leaders that are as strong as him. And it's like, oh, this is some great basic storytelling that everybody just seems to forget nowadays.
Well, that's why, to me, I was reminded of something like Nine Princes of Amber, which is one of my favorite series, because it was like you had two races, like a hero race and a regular race, almost among living together, if you know what I mean. And it wasn't like these guys were so tough that no normal people could take them out, but they were tough enough that a small number of normal people couldn't take them out. So there were some great scenes where they, he'd snuck back into the cat. I think it was the father who'd snuck back into the castle, or was it the son? I'm trying to remember towards the end was it the son when he came in at the end? Anyway, they snuck back into the castle and they suddenly
The
reveal who they
junior
are.
was sneaking back in
That's it. Yeah.
because he wanted to rescue the woman he didn't know was his mother, so
Yeah.
his fiance and him can finally get married.
Yep. And I love the whole thing. So this mother has been chained in the public square for like 25 years. And there's this great old swordsman who
Katapa.
who's like her, the wise old man from the previous regime, and he's trying to get her to run away. And this woman has not seen her baby since the baby was like born, and she will not leave. She says, "My son will rescue me." And she just waits there, in the rain and the sun, and she's all cracked and awful, and you don't realize till well into the second movie, I think it is, that she's the beautiful girl that the guy meets, in a the father meets. But it's just the whole thing, the faith of the characters and the family qualities and their willingness to, the good guys to sacrifice for family and the bad guys to sacrifice their family for their own purposes, And there's a wonderful scene of a, 200-foot tall statue of one of the bad guys being knocked over.
Villains are all, yes, one, it's 100-foot tall statue, therefore 100 lives, or we should be expected to spend 100 lives on it. And then, of course, Baahubali comes in and grabs it and single-handedly drags it back up and away from the people, who were about to be squished by it.
That's a great scene because here's this a giant statue, gold statue is about to fall, and all these people who have been pulling it are about to be killed. And he grabs the rope. He comes up and he grabs the rope, and he has no idea what's going on, or he's only just arrived in this strange city at the top of the tallest mountain. And first of all, they see him, and not only does he grab the rope, but he puts heart back into them, and they all start grabbing the rope. And second of all, they start chanting his name, and I, at least as a viewer, was like, how in the world do they know who he is? Why in the world do they know to chant his name? But of course, the answer is that they're chanting his father's name, and he looks like his father. And you don't know that yet because you don't really know what's going on. And so, and you don't know that the father was the main rival of the guy whose statue's being put up and things like that. So the whole thing unfolds really, like the story, the camera work on the storytelling is really well done. And just the way that the guys see the guy and are inspired by him, and you realize that even though this guy is this, kid who was raised at the bottom of a mountain, and where he kept trying to climb the mountain and it was too tough, so he would fall, and he got tougher and tougher as he kept trying, that he is, you begin to realize there's something more to what's going on with him. I mean, you kind of knew because somebody had brought him down from the mountain, but you don't really know what's going on at that point. And I thought that was a really neat scene because you see that he has some of the qualities that would make a good leader. So because if a hereditary king comes back and left when he was a baby, he also has to have qualities that make you think he's going to be a good king, or you don't necessarily want him to be the guy who takes over. You know what I mean? So I thought the whole thing was just done really well, and it was splendid looking. Huge mountains and huge buildings and gold and flowers. I mean, the Bollywood is really splendid anyway at their colors and stuff.
Oh, and the details really in the city.
Yeah.
Yeah, that stuff always astounds me because it's like they put all this work and heart into it, and then it's like I look at like the America thing, and it's like, I love America, but I kind of wish we had more crazy architecture in our past, and not just these awesome skyscrapers. I live in St. Louis, who prides itself on our brickwork and our Gateway Arch and other things like that. And we have rules in our city that, no skyscraper may overtake the Gateway Arch. But even then, it's like we don't do like we have like whatever mishmash of German and French came in and left their gargoyles and stuff around the city, but we don't have these massive gold-covered palaces and strange temples and stuff like that. Well, I don't know. It depends if you count the St. Louis Basilica, but like it's just not the same sort of depth and quality. It's not all over the place like it is in this movie.
We certainly don't have anything like this movie, which is just utterly splendid and huge, and there are scenes with elephants, and the interesting thing is that there are religious rituals, which I assume would be familiar ones to the audience watching it in its original language. But when we see a ritual where a woman has to carry coals on her head and not be interrupted and walk around the city, I don't know if that's totally made up for the story or if they do that. But it's just really neat to see giant. They have a giant effigy statue that they burn. That's part of this fire ritual. That there's just something that happens in the story, and one of the reasons it happens is that later on, towards the end of the movie, they have to do it again, and now the viewer is completely prepped on what has to happen for it not to get messed up, so they can then have a fight scene in the middle of a ritual where the woman has to make it, without being interrupted and stuff like that, and you're totally clued in as to what's going on. But I have no idea if that's a real ritual or if it's something they made up for that story. It was really, everything is really just over the top, splendid in how they do it.
When it's real sincere, you don't sense that there's any irony or winking at the audience in it. It's like, since the creators completely buy into this world and everything, I can usually tell, if somebody starts watching the movie, about 10, 15 minutes in, you can kind of tell if someone's either going to buy into it and enjoy it or just not really accept it at all. And it's like, if you buy into it, I find the movie really entertaining.
Yeah. And I think you're right. You have to just buy into it. You have to just go, okay, this is the way it is. I'm gonna go with this and not be kind of smirking at it, or it wouldn't be much fun. But they just do such clever little things. One of the scenes towards the early on that's clever is there is an idol that if you make a wish and you pour water on it, it's supposed to come true or something like that. I might be misremembering, but the mom is trying to.
It's like an obelisk to Shiva.
Yeah, and so the mom is trying to put water on it, and she's having
because she wants her son to obey. That's the more entertaining part, is what her wish is.
Her wish is that her son will stop wanting to go up the mountain. And the son decides there's not enough water for his mom's purposes, so he picks up this giant iron idol and carries it and puts it under the waterfall. But the problem is that now they don't know if it's because the person who's making the wish is supposed to pour the water. So now they don't know if it's the mom's wish or the son's wish that has a whole waterfall worth of water coming down over this idol. And of course, the mom's wish does not come true because the son does make his way up the mountain. And the son's wish to go up to the top of the mountain does come true, And though, in the end, she eventually the mom makes her way up there too. And he ends up kind of with two moms at the end, his real mom and his mom who raised him, and he's respectful to both of them in a nice way.
Well, and that whole effort pays off really beautifully in the closing shot of the movie, which
yeah, I think you're right there. The one part of the plot that I felt could have been fleshed out a little bit more is that the girl you see when he's going up the mountain the first time, the girl that the son falls in love with, they then move to so much of the father's story, which is really good, that I felt like they could have used a little more time resolving, coming back to the son story. But it's not like they leave anything out. I just would have liked to see a little more of it.
Oh, so many of us would totally be there for a Baahubali 3, showing. Although that does remind me, Jagi, I was looking up some research for this.
It's actually Jagi.
Jagi, sorry.
It's all right. It just occurred to me you and I have probably never spoken before, even though we get all the time. Go ahead.
I also have a bad accent, so bear with me, I'm sure.
Well, it looks like Jagi, so I only ever correct anybody once. But if it's helpful, it's the G from the word magic, so that's why it's Jagi.
Jagi, okay. But I found out that there is apparently an animated series
Really?
of Baahubali. Yeah, it's like on Amazon Prime, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
apparently covers like the growing up period between the senior and the uncle who, becomes ultimately the villain. But
Yeah, interesting. Well,
and
that
I'm like,
sounds
well, if they
okay.
do that for, the son's adventures, I would be there.
Yeah. I mean, both of those could be good, but it would be fun to see the other things the son had done when he was young that we didn't see, because he could have done all sorts of things down at the bottom of the waterfall. That's
Although I
really
think
neat.
there's some implications in the movie that the bottom of the waterfall was kind of like boring and peaceful, and
Yeah, that's
and
true.
all
But
the adventure was happening above. But,
that's true, but he still could have fought a bull, or what I mean. He could have had some adventures,
oh,
there
he
too.
probably did. We know he was very mischievous.
Yeah, I mean, and he clearly developed this great strength and stuff, and one can assume he might have done something other than just, climb up the waterfall to do that.
But when you're talking about he inspires people, I actually really enjoyed that part of the movie where he would repeatedly, like in the second part. So spoilers for you, Ben, but in the second part, he goes to this smaller kingdom that I think's we would probably think of it as like a state to
Yeah, small.
Maha
Yeah.
to the larger kingdom, federal kingdom that they're in, and he meets this one guy that's largely a goofball, and Bahubali Senior undergoes this whole routine of making this
Oh
other
yeah.
guy look good. And it's just hilarious. It kills me every time I watch it. And I love the bit because he's so incompetent. But then, like, when the chips are down, this Bahubali Senior, we were making jokes that he cast a buff on the guy, and then he, like, becomes competent in a warrior. And, and I
Oh
just love that bit
yeah, the
that
guy.
Bahubali, like, builds people up.
Yeah, so he's a kind of a goofy guy, but he thinks really impressively of himself, and he kind of goes through a neat character arc where he, I think, kind of becomes more aware of what kind of person he is, and he becomes loyal, and then he, comes to a tragic end. But um, he dies loyally, supporting the. I don't know. I thought that whole thing was a really cool arc and funny, and not. And it could so easily have been mean spirited.
Yeah, that was like part of me is like if this guy had been like what if this had been what Jar Jar Binks was like in the first movie, like Star Wars fans would have probably praised him as the greatest character ever.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's
some of us in the movie group almost cried when he ultimately died, and
yeah. I know it was really painful, and it was so sad, and he was trying. I mean, he by that time he was such a good guy. Ah.
but I found all the characters in it really compelling. I mean, even the villain at some, they're about in the second movie. Like, I was like, man, this actor's doing like a really good job. And even though
Yeah.
I don't like this guy, I'm kind of invested in his character.
Well, the crippled father also was, a really interesting character, and both the instigator behind a lot of this, but also ultimately, I think what he tried to create kind of got out of control, with his son and stuff. So I thought that he was interesting too.
Yeah, so much of the movie reminds me of, C.S. Lewis had a repeated point, or a point he would make often about, the proper hierarchy, or you should say priority of things. So, you should try to aim to make like the most important things the most important, and
Yeah.
then like if you aim for heaven then you'll get earth in the deal, I think was one of his quotes. And I thought a lot of that was kind of captivating in this movie because like the Baladeva, the villain, he like wants to be in charge, he wants the power and all that, and ultimately he never really gets it. Whereas, Bahubali is more concerned about the people and doing what's right and, the more important things. And because of those actions, he gets the power in the city and the love of everyone. And
well, it's very archetypical and very much like, old myths and things where the one brother is selfish and the other is not, and the selfish brother keeps doing things for the wrong reasons and the other brother does things for the right reasons, they work out, but then the selfish brother betrays and tricks, and when the mom finally realized that she'd been tricked, it was so sad.
Oh yeah, and
she really was completely sincere, and she had figured out that Baahubali was the better choice, and then she got tricked basically into, believing wrong things about him. It was really heartbreaking.
Oh yeah, it's just been a while since I've seen that kind of archetype like just executed so well and compelling.
I did find the sort of the I can't remember. I think the villain, the older brother of Bahubali Senior, was very like I found him very compelling. It's like he's always there, and then it's like there's his brother, and it's like what's your brother doing? Well, he's earning everyone's love. What? Okay, well, what's important? Well, they say, oh, strength is important. Ah, yes, strength's important. Why am I not getting everyone's love? And it just keeps on and on until he became a very cruel person who just didn't care anymore. And so when it comes to the contest at the end, who kills the villain the fastest? He kill steals. I mean, and that was a kill steal. But in the end, he did everything properly according to the rules that he was given. And his father, of course, is always like, and I found him so interesting, is always pushing him on and on further, even though I don't think at any point in time he recognized himself as any sort of villain.
I think you're right. That's what I thought kind of towards the end, that the father was kind of, I don't know, it kind of almost like he didn't realize how off everything had gone. It was kind of the feeling I got, and it was all kind of his fault. And I was going to make another point, but you made that point. It was interesting. I've kind of forgotten the point I was going to make. Oh no, I know what it was. The whole story with the girl was so heartbreaking because Bahubali Sr. falls in love with this girl, and his brother knows. I think, if I recall, like he didn't want her, and then he changed his mind because he found out the brother liked her, or something like that. But the mom doesn't know this, so the mom is trying to get the girl for the older brother. The girl is under the impression now that he's trying to get, and the younger brother think it's them coming together, and so the whole thing is so tragic because several people involved in that whole thing are doing what they think is entirely the right things, and the people they're reacting with have totally the wrong idea about what's going on. And I thought it was so tragic because this poor girl comes there thinking she's going to marry this guy who's won her heart by being, goofy and clever and living in disguise for a while and all these other things. And it's just this malicious revenge that has set up her failure. And of course, the mom has no idea. The mother who's trying to set up the wedding doesn't understand that her eldest son, who she felt she had slighted, was deliberately trying to do in his brother. She just thought, the brother was getting in the way here. It's so tragic and it's so touching and it's really well done.
Yeah, and I think it's a great example of creating conflicts or creating like a larger conflict drama, because this is something that's been kind of bugging me because I see it more and more nowadays where people are like, oh, you need conflict to create interest. So they'll have a scene and then they'll just make two characters arguing. They're just bickering. And if you try to think about like what are these two really fighting about, it a lot of times doesn't make a lot of sense. Or, you can kind of tell, oh, well, they're fighting because the author needs drama here, whereas this one in this movie, there are like several scenes and long moments where nobody's really fighting, but then you can kind of see how like the seeds are being planted for a later conflict, and pieces are being moved around for a later checkmate or whatever. And I always found that much more engaging than just two people arguing all the time.
Right, and there's a feeling of inevitability, by which I mean that one step is inevitably leading to another step, but the steps make perfect sense. It's
Oh
not,
yeah, all the
you're not
characters are behaving
faking it
very
or, right.
realistically, and
And you can easily see how this will lead to that and how painful it is without it, you feeling like you're being manipulated. It's just like, oh my gosh, that's going to happen, you know? And then there's a few moments where you find it, you know, where there are revelations, like, you know, about who killed the father and things like that, that are just so amazing and so painful.
yeah, I was wondering about Ben because like anytime I've shown this movie to people like our group and such that have really got into it, as soon as like the first movie ends, they're like, watch the next part later on.
Yeah.
Like there's just cries of no, I got to know what happens now.
Well, I think Ben's problem was he doesn't really have access to it because he's
yeah. What I was just gonna say is that I was noticing he wasn't like really begging me for a copy of the second movie somehow because.
Well, it's one of those things where it's like I'm not one of those guys who's like, spoilers, it's all ruined. Like I can know what the ending is and perfectly
still enjoy
enjoy
it.
the ride. And that's just kind of how I am. Like there's no need for me to be like super dramatic about this or anything. You know, I can already smell from like 10 miles away that there's going to be a happy ending. The kingdom's going to be restored. Everyone's going to be happy, and I'm happy that that's what's going to happen, and I want it to happen. And if ever I happen to catch it on one of my subscription services that I can watch it, I'll take it up. But you know,
we had a week between being able to watch one and being able to watch two, and it was a very frustrating week.
that was the same way with our group, is because, well, when I was previewing it, because I always check these things because of where we watch them, it's like as soon as it got done, like I had to go to bed that night, and it was killing me. And so as soon as I could the next day, I was watching part two.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just that moment where Kadapa just reveals, like, I was the one that had to kill your father. I mean, you just want to go, how? Why?
It was so unexpected and so astonishing. And then when it actually
and
happened,
heartbreaking.
It was so heartbreaking. You know, and then, you know, oh my gosh. And then, the resolution between him and the son at the end is really wonderful.
Oh, there were many manly tears shed when Junior started calling Kadapa grandfather. Like everyone in the group was loving that moment.
Yeah, well, for those of you who haven't seen, you know, so in the movie, the Kadapa was going to be the grandfather of the baby. He was going to be the first person who held the baby.
Because they have that tradition that a grandfather should be like the first one to hold a child as a blessing.
But
do we mean Godfather?
No, grandfather.
No, grandfather.
The grandfather's supposed to be the first one who holds it, but Baahubali's father, the grandfather of the son, is dead. That's why all this was happening anyway, you see. So they were
adopting
man. Right. They adopt him as their adopted grandfather.
And because he's a commoner, that was such a high honor for him.
And he was a slave. You know, he was a fighting slave, basically. So he's going to be honored in this way, and instead he has to go kill the guy whose son he was going to become the grandfather of. You know, the guy was saying, "Hey, you're like my father. You know, you're like a family member. I've loved you my whole life." And now he gets an order from the queen to go kill him. And when the son hears the whole story, even though Kadapa was not the person who got to hold him first, he calls him grandfather, and he like says to him, I mean, he doesn't say it, but through his actions, he says, "I'm going to honor you and the way my father would have honored you for what you are to my family, even though you obeyed your queen and killed my dad." And it's such a wonderful moment because the guy is so cool, and he's like a slave, but he's so filled with honor that he won't turn against the people who he's bound by honor to serve, even though they're evil, you know? unless he has a legitimate, like when the son comes and he's the legitimate ruler and things like that. So it's just got these wonderful emotional moments in it. And it's got some lightheartedness. There's the whole thing when the father meets the girl he eventually marries, and he's pretending that he's just kind of a layabout, doesn't know what he's doing. Meanwhile,
and Kadapa doesn't get it. That's even funnier.
And their backs turned, he's killing people, and yeah, exactly. Nobody seems to get it except for him. But so he just plays about being not serious until he eventually wins the girl's heart. And it's so charming and lighthearted, and that part of the movie is a lot of fun. And you don't, for a little while, you don't see the tragedy coming until a little further along, and you get a breath of fresh air before the pain comes back. But it's just really well done and really over the top in the most charming ways,
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit that the romance in the first part was just. That is probably one part of the movie I'll just laugh at, the fact that he puts makeup on the girl in the middle of a fight.
Yeah.
Just kills me every time. But the
right.
But the romance in the second part is definitely much stronger, and heck, I would watch a TV series of just Baahubali Senior and Katapa having adventures on the road.
Yes, oh, definitely, because that part was excellent, and I kind of wish that it had gone on longer. And you're right, if they were going to put that in a series and just have a number of episodes of them going and doing things, before they met the girl, or because they were just off kind of adventuring together. That was
well,
really
it was a tradition for the new ruler to survey the kingdom and kind of know what he's going to be ruling over. So that's kind of why they were journeying around to everything.
Yeah, that part was really good.
And that's the sign of a good movie, is where you're watching it and you're like, oh, I would love to just see this part just expanded more, over and over and over. So
it's so true. And I think, I hope if they do make, this cartoon that they have with the two brothers, that maybe they'd spend some time on that, because that was just a lot of fun, But the whole sequence when the kid is growing up and he's doing things like catching a scorpion that's moving towards his mom, and it stings him, and he pretends that nothing happened and stuff. And there's a scene where he's standing in a pool and they're shooting him with arrows, and he's knocking all the arrows out of the way with a sword. And that was one of those moments where I just went, now that's a Prince of Amber there. It's greater than, these demigod things that they can do. But
just what tops is when he gets done and he gives that little wink to the girls watching him.
Yeah. And by that time you can begin to see that the brother is kind of envious of him because he's just coolly good at everything. But you've seen him, and the funniest thing about that was that I watched that video quite a few times, and there's a scene where he goes over as a young man and he's talking to Kadapa, and the soldiers. And I was trying to guess what he was saying when I actually saw the movie with the subtitles. I had been completely off about what was going on between I didn't know he was a prince, Oh,
what were you assuming the first time?
I think I thought that he wanted to hang out with the men or something, like he was a poor kid who wanted to hang out with them, and really he was a prince who was saying it was okay to eat with them or something. I mean, it was completely reversed from what was actually going on in the scene, because I didn't know when I was watching it that he was a prince.
Yeah, and that he wanted to break bread with them, which was, a really high honor.
Exactly. And I thought it was the opposite, like he was trying to talk them into letting him be there, and
it's kind of funny because he is, but yeah, like you said, from a different direction. He's not a
totally different direction, right? Exactly. I mean, I had to write the basics right, but how he was going about it and what the dynamics were was completely different. I thought he was a lower rank to them, and the real scene was he was a higher rank, and it was really interesting. But you had the basics of it, and it was the whole thing was just so dramatic and so charming, and just enough really over the top things like chariots and jumping off of mountains and shooting, and knocking swords out of the air. And
what about weaponized tablecloths now? I mean, for those who don't know, they are preparing for the big battle between the invading army and then the two now adult princes,
Oh, those,
Bahubali and
yeah.
Baladeva. And Baladeva decides to kind of screw over his brother and like takes away all the proper military equipment.
No, it's
So
his father who does that. And he's
right,
like,
right.
oh, what kind of king, if he can't requisition his own equipment? And he's like, oh, well, we're tearing up the thing. Why? Well, he needs it for something.
Yeah, so then Bahubali just invents a new tactic to get to, make use of what he has. And then you have like no idea what's going on until you
Yeah.
suddenly watch it play out.
When he takes the tent or whatever it is, and you're like, what in the world is he gonna do with that? And John and I were watching it. We're going like, well, I don't think this would work in real life, but it's plausible enough that you can kind of enjoy it, you know.
Well,
Oh yeah,
by far,
and I've heard of fire being used not like that, like not with the blankets, like with the tent fabric hitting them, but like with the oil-soaked rags and stuff like that. Like, yeah, sure, but absolutely.
That's what I mean. I mean, it was one of these things where you're like, well, okay, it's a little over, a little over the top, but it's not so over the top that I can't enjoy it, because I could kind of imagine something like that happening. It just probably wouldn't be as coordinated and useful, you know what I mean? But it was compared to the other things going on, you'd go, okay, I'm going to enjoy this, and just enjoyed his cleverness. And the big thing in that scene is that one of the guys constantly acts so as to not only get the enemy, but also to spare his own men, and the other guy drives right over his own men. And that
that scene. Well, it wasn't just his own men, but it was human shields that they had gotten like from the commoners, from like the surrounding countryside. And yeah, that was probably the scene that I was definitely 100% in senior and junior's camp, is where they're presented with that riddle, and then he figures out a way around it to save his people and then continue forward into the enemy.
Yeah, that whole bit was, I thought, really, I mean, it was really well done, because you had some sympathy for the brother's desire to win and but his methods were just certainly not kind to his own people, and to the people, the innocents, and then the other guy finds ways around it, and he manages to do it better, and it's just it was really inspiring, and also sad, because he just kind of gets outwitted by his brother. So.
Well, his brother, did become amoral. I actually thought it interesting when his son gets killed in like the first third of the first movie, and it's like, wow.
I was a little surprised by that, because they kind of killed off the son before we really had a chance to know who any of these people were. So the son, the grandson of the original queen, gets killed off before the viewer really has much chance to invest in the earlier generations and what's going on with them,
Mm-hmm.
Because if
the one Kadapa was trying to defend, yeah,
and because if that had happened later, I think it would have I would have felt sadder about that. You know what I mean? I mean, not that I'm sure the guy was also a villain, but I thought they did a pretty good job of bringing some sympathy for the. They both made the villain horrible, but you also had some sympathy for that whole side of the family to a bit. I don't know, the whole scene where he's wrestling and they kind of put him on stage and you find out a bit about him, which I really like. This is the villain. The villain is like killing people with his bare hands or something. I can't remember exactly what was happening. Fighting a bull.
Well, he wrestles a bull that's like that's 6 ordinary men are trying to restrain, and he just takes care of it by himself. And I mean that's the other thing is as awesome as Bahubali is that his enemy is like possibly even stronger than him, so he has to try to use his wits and everything.
And that was a great scene, because up until that moment, it's like all these ordinary people and this super god. But then you find out that the other side has a demigod too, And
Mhm.
suddenly you realize that there's a real challenges awaiting him in the future and things like that. And I thought that was really well done because they just showed it. You talk about showing versus telling. They just showed it. You just saw it right up front what these guys were like and what they could do. And you knew that immediately what was that there was a challenge out there and what kind of thing was coming. I don't mean in a hey it's predictable way, but I mean in a hey this isn't going to be as easy as it might have first looked type of way. So that part I thought was really good.
Yeah, and in the final showdown, I mean, it is a real knockdown, drag out fight. That it's there. Sometimes you're like, I think Baahubali will win, but I'm not real sure how at this moment.
Yeah, and part of the fight is in front of the girl who has to keep walking. There's that. I can't remember now. It's been a while. So I wanted to rewatch it, and I didn't get to rewatch it. So I'm trying to remember it in order. But they're trying to walk around with the coals on her head, and they're having to outwit each other and trying to stop her while they're fighting while she's walking. I thought that part was really dramatic.
And then the solution to the broken bridge, it just kills me. It's so
exactly.
great.
I mean, and the guy is just so annoyed when he realizes he's been outwitted. It is great.
And plus the whole, just symbology that, she's walking on his face. It's
and she's been waiting so long.
Yeah, there's some stuff in this movie that you're like, okay, that's obvious, but it's almost so obvious, like you don't even realize it. You know what I mean? Like, like you missed the forest for the trees.
Yeah, and it's really. I mean, there are plenty of movies that are enjoyable. But this movie was enjoyable, but it also was one of those movies where you would just stop and reflect on it, like, oh my gosh, partially because it was more than one generation. So look how this led to this, and look how this person ended up like this, and look how she went through all this suffering, and then she got this moment, and I think I spent a lot of time thinking about it, which is not always the case. Sometimes you go and you really enjoy a movie, but then you go away, there's not much to think about afterwards, But this one had all sorts of themes of good and evil, and corruption versus courage, and faith and family, and all sorts of things that went on with it.
And just plain insane visuals.
Yeah, and it was completely, utterly gorgeous looking at the same time. And there's good music. I listen to some of the songs from when I'm writing. I like when I'm writing to listen to music that doesn't have English language because I don't get distracted, Otherwise, I stop and listen to the words. So that song where he's going up the mountain the first time is one I listen to all the time. The music is absolutely gorgeous, And
I've made the main theme my ringtone.
Yeah, I mean the music is great. There's also one of the ending songs is just terrific. It's like drums and it's just really good music. And so they have these beautiful. The story itself and the visuals itself is good, but then there's the dancing and the the music and the and I never quite figured out in the scene where he's going up the mountain and he's seeing the girl and she keeps vanishing, and I guess that's just like a vision because the real girl doesn't know she did that. I thought that she was going to be a supernatural creature, but she wasn't. It was like he was being led by some sort of vision of her. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I always kind of assumed that since that happened after the waterfall, that was like a vision given to him by Shiva to like inspire him up.
Yeah, I think I think it was something like that. It was like he was being shown the good qualities because that girl most likely would have been a princess or something if she had been raised. I don't know what her relationship was, like if she was the son or the daughter of anybody there, but she would have grown up as a beautiful, gracious lady if the brother hadn't sacked the second kingdom,
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost as if we're seeing her a lot like she might have been if she didn't have to be this thief girl.
Well, now I also think, I will say the movie is kind of fun to rewatch because I was rewatching some of it a while back, and
really
once you kind of know it.
This weekend, I didn't get to.
You'll start like seeing like, oh, so that is actually referring to setting up, and you start seeing like where all the threads and such are. But I think
definitely
those
like to do that because I picked up some later that I think if I went back now, I'd like to be able to notice, this is that guy and this is that guy.
yeah. Yeah, like the rebel group that Junior finds, which his lady is a part of. I think well, I mean, some of them may be related to that minor kingdom that his mom was from, but I actually think a lot of that group is drawn from the community that uh, the senior and his wife were banished to when they were exiled out of the city.
That could
And
be,
then
but
remember,
what I didn't realize to the end is that the leader of all those guys is the brother of the mother. It's his uncle. And it took me a long
Oh,
time to realize because he's like when he goes to where the mother comes from, the ruler there is the uncle, and the uncle has a wife, and then there's the girl who he married or wants to marry, is the mother of the baby, and that's the old man. I'm like 98% sure that he's the guy who's the old man who's telling the girl, you shouldn't have messed up and all this.
okay, I'll double check because I mean, I actually am not really arguing with you. I thought, of course, they could also be the same guy because of the way things are structured, but I thought he was like an elder in that village that Bahubali was helping out with. When he created when he created wooden automation for like
Oh,
a small
I
factory and
know now you're
everything.
talking about, but they talk about they talk about the woman being their princess. So I'm pretty sure that that's her people. Because there is a
Yeah,
scene where they get sacked. Now you could be right. I mean, yeah, the autumn that's a great. That's just a little bit too, but that's pretty great too. Where the
yeah.
they're doing all
Well,
those clever things for that little village.
and you can kind of see that like that village was really loving Bahubali and his wife. So that's why I kind of was associated that rebel group with them because I was thinking like, they were the kind like, oh well, this should be the true king and queen or princess. So I mean, of course, like I said, it could be both groups mixed together. That
Yeah,
would
I'll
make
have to
sense.
look
But
back and over. I thought from some stuff they said in the early point that it was actually her people who were there, but you're right. Could be that other group, but I don't know. We can go look it over, but
it's just an
obviously it's
excuse to
got a
rewatch
lot.
it.
It's got a lot going for it here.
So
I just
real
thought they were
quick, I think.
loyalists.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean that's kind of a large group, but it's like which section of loyalists are they? But so like of what you've seen, if you had to pick one or two favorite scenes, what would they be? We'll start with Ben since he hadn't got to see everything.
I definitely like the scene where they're having that big war fight, and the elder brother stuns an elephant with his retractable mace, which is just utterly epic. Like at no point in
Don't you
time
want a cosplay of that weapon?
right? I just want this part of my goals. It's like I want to be able to cosplay shirtless and not have people look at me in revulsion. That's the ultimate dream. But slather me in coconut oil, I'll do it. But it's just like the fact that at no point in time, at least in the parts that I saw, does the villainous brother ever like back down from a fight. Like
Yeah.
his courage is ridiculously high.
Well, he's a
And
good character. He's not
oh yeah,
a weak character as characters go. I mean, he might not be a good man, but he's certainly a good character.
oh yeah, and
Oh yeah, and kudos to the actor that did him because I mean he gets more time to shine in part two. And I've kind of watched some interviews with him, but the actor that did Baladeva was I thought he did just a great job.
oh yeah, definitely. My other favorite, let's see here. The fight between Katabata and the Arabian trader was pretty good.
That was
But
good.
I think I enjoyed. Let's see here. There's that one scene that kind of stuck out at me, where Katabata has tried to kill a bull as it charges the unprotected back of the villainous brother, before, of course, the villainous brother defeats it. Um, and the villainous brother comes up and he's like, "Ah, you serve me, even though I know you hate me. Therefore, I'll give you whatever gift you like." And he goes, "Well, free
The
your
mother.
mother."
Yeah.
And is it his mother?
No,
Hey, it's the wife of Senior.
it's the
Okay.
wife who turned him down. It's the girl he wanted to marry also who turned him down.
Oh,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
some reason, I thought it was the Queen Mother.
No, the Queen Mother is the one who dies in the opening scene when she gives the baby in the water.
But to be fair, she kills like 2 dudes with the arrow she was shot with.
Yeah.
You see, I just thought she was a nursemaid.
Yeah, no, the
which
Queen
is-
Mom takes the baby down the hill and dies.
yes.
And
See, that's one of the things revealed in part 2.
The locked up woman is the mother of the young one, and the brother wanted to marry her and is angry at her for continuing to turn him down. So he has her locked up there.
Well,
Although there is room to debate about whether he really wanted the woman for himself or if he just wanted her to like spite his brother. Like he never really actually cared.
There is a lot of room for that, but he's still saying to her, "Come on and give in to me and I'll let you go 25 years later." So, I mean, whether it's because he's lust or whether it's because of revenge, she's still a woman he wants, but he doesn't necessarily want her like he loves her.
Oh yeah, I think some of it's because that would be like the final defeat of his brother.
Yeah. And because getting spit in the face by the woman for 25 years and she'd rather be in the courtyard than marry you is painful to your ego.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway, so he comes up and he's kind of is talking to her, and he's like, well, why do you pick up these sticks? And he dashes it out of her hands, and she goes, "Do you think I'm doing it for some crazy madwoman thing? This is the funeral pyre of the evil king, And it's like, oh, that's dramatic. They gave it just the right weight and like character look, and you see her wild eyes for the first time. And it's like she's a little mad, but it's like it's definitely with a purpose.
Oh my god, the actress is great because she does that character so well. But the
yeah.
young version of the same character when she's a girl, she also does really well. And then she gets him with her stick. It seems so crazy, but she actually has a purpose and everything. I don't know, she's just amazing.
Oh yeah, she is definitely the woman you'd say like, okay, if this guy was going to marry anybody, yeah, I can see why it was her.
Yeah, exactly. And she's no slouch. I would say of my two favorite scenes, one of them, and it's hard to say, there might be other scenes that I really like that are not coming to mind, but without question, one of them is him going up the mountain. Because I've watched that one over and over again. I think that whole scene, when the first time I'm watching it, and he's going up the mountain and he makes this huge leap and he falls, and he ends up getting caught by, weed vines or something. But the whole thing is so dramatic, and the guy shows such perseverance, and he's not letting go. And then there's this girl, and then he's leaping off of things and shooting. I mean, that whole scene is just amazing. And I think that another one would be the one I mentioned where he's sneaking into the palace to save his mom. And, you suddenly realize that that's not just another guard, that's him. And he's not, and he can fight 5 guys at once. It's only, you think you have enough guards and you don't have enough guards. That whole bit I thought was great. I love that section.
I just love that mom could sense when he entered like the zip code.
I know. She's like, my son is coming.
I just assume that's a real superpower all mothers have.
It certainly, and just the fact that she had such faith that he was coming, and then she knew when he was coming, and then he came and he freed her, even though we didn't know who she was. I mean, the whole thing was so amazing, because I don't know that if I had a baby and the baby was taken away before I really got to even meet it, that I would trust that baby was going to come back 25 years later. It's just, it was really, really, took a lot of faith on her part to hold out for that. But it got replayed. I mean, she she got it.
Well, it's also that there's no
Hey,
like
that's what I want.
fantastic kingdoms and whatnot going on that are in the air for it. To sort of like have a hope in, it's like what I like to call Fisher King rules, where it's like because it's the king and the kingdom and all that jazz, there's
Yeah.
all kinds of special rules specifically for this situation that reality follows, but not necessarily in any other way.
Yeah, and I think you definitely had in this movie senses of destiny, senses of the right of the rightful king, sense of I mean, you could tell that the older son, I mean that the father, older Baahubali should have been the king, and and that idea of of a cripple not being appropriate king, the husband of the queenly woman, uh which plays into a lot of old stories, like old Irish stories. There's a lot of places where they think if a person's crippled, you can't be king. And yet there's an implication in there somewhere, more than once, that it was his personality and not his body that was the problem. That if he had just been a decent guy, a good guy, that I think they actually say once, your hand wouldn't have held you back if you hadn't been such
That's
a
true.
jerk.
They do.
Yeah.
In part 2, Katapa tells him off to his face. That's a great moment, but it's certainly implied because the queen mother is the one that like rules the kingdom, and yet she seems a little bit stronger than maybe normal women, but she's still not like the warrior that Katapa is and everything. But you can tell she rules because she's so wise and clever and concerned for the people and such.
So, Nate, what are your favorite scenes?
See, I could like break them down by category and everything, but I'm going to pick one from each part. And part 1, I will probably have to go with the final battle scene, and when they're making their charge toward the opposing enemy, and then the human shields are brought out, and that whole play between going through the opposing forces. I just love everything about that.
So that did have the chariots in it. So Ben did see that, the crazy chariot with the thing on the front.
Oh yeah,
I found that clip on YouTube. It's amazing.
Yeah.
Well, did you see the clip where Baahubali is on his horse and he gets like a little metal bola and it's just leaning over, twirling it, and you just see guys go flying up?
Oh yeah, it's
and
pretty
that was
amazing.
Just a splendid fight scene. The whole thing was splendid, and unlike some fight scenes, it was pretty easy to follow what was going on. A lot of times in fight scenes, you kind of can't follow what's going on, but for the most part, I think you could follow who was looking and who was, who was moving and which side it was and things like that. Once or twice, we wasn't exactly sure what side someone was on, but for the most part, it was pretty clear.
And then in part 2, all I will say is catapult palm trees.
Oh no!
And you will probably guess where I'm.
Scene. That's so famous.
Yeah, that's the one that got me to watch the movie, and when it showed up, I was like, "Yep, I love this."
Yeah, that was great.
Talk about a team building exercise.
Yeah. No, there was some really part of what was so. I mean, in addition to all the other things we mentioned, the inventiveness of the battle scene. And it wasn't just one thing. I mean, we mentioned, the trees. We mentioned the fire and the tents, and it wasn't just one thing in the chariot. It was like 5 things that were just crazy inventive, and they weren't and who knows? Maybe these are from, maybe they're from some Indian epic or something, but they weren't the things I'd seen before a million times. They were new, crazy, inventive things, So that was really enjoyable too.
Well, and like John pointed out in one of his Star Wars essays, the battles really had that back and forth to them that you don't see as often nowadays. So, you'd see the Mashamati's forces start advancing, but then, something would happen. There'd be a rout, and they would start falling back. But then Katapa would rally the line, and
Yeah, yeah, and that happened more than once, and for slightly different reasons, with different people rallying and stuff. Yeah, yeah. And there's tons of other really good scenes. Another one that I mentioned briefly that just amused me to no end was I think I watched it, 2 or 3 times when we were going through, like, hey, we got to see that again. Was the whole bit of him lazing around while he was first meeting the girl he falls in love with, the father, and he and Kadapa are, and they're just lazing there pretending to be lazy, and then they're like actually fighting a whole group of people. Then they turn around and they're pretending to be lazy again. That whole section was just great. It was really fun.
Or just the whole fight sequence where they've got like one weapon and are tossing it back and forth between them.
Yeah, I mean, and the choreography of the fight scenes was really good. They were entertaining to watch, It didn't take itself too seriously, but it wasn't campy either. It was just fun action. Yeah.
Or just the whole bit where Baahubali is making that what I call the doofus look good, like when they're doing the boar hunt and he's actually deflecting one arrow with another.
It's in this scene. They're doing things like hunting a boar, and the one guy is trying to make it look like this other guy is actually winning. And he's doing crazy things like, shooting arrows off, just crazy things that he can do. And the other guy doesn't know that he's doing it. He thinks he's actually succeeding. And it's very funny. And yet, in some movies, that guy would just be the butt of the joke. And in this movie, he gets one over and he kind of, he becomes a better person. And that's one of the things. I mean, there's little things like that just make the movie a step above the average movie of its type, if you understand what I mean.
Yep. Yeah, we used to joke that this is like almost everything the movie, because in part 2, Kadapa and Senior, I mean, that's almost like a comedy and a bit of a musical. Then there's, the romances and the epic fights and
the family stuff and there's wars and there's, city stuff. Yeah, I mean, there's politics. It really does have, and that was something John noticed when he first started watching a few Bollywood movies and some Chinese movies. And I know we said we might talk about this, and I think we should just meet another Sunday and discuss in general these things. But this thing in particular is that they don't do genre quite the same way we do. We tend to go, this is a comedy, this is a drama, this has a ghost in it, this is, doesn't. And they kind of just throw it all together. I don't think there were any ghosts in this one, but they just kind of have this whole thing where they just tell the story the way the story goes, and they don't worry about fitting it into, action versus comedy or something like that. So I thought it was really enjoyable. Anyway, I think I probably need to, it's been over an hour, but once we
I will say I knew I had to show the movie to John during the part in part 2 where the sailboat turns into a swan that flies.
My gosh, I forgot. Yes. Oh, that was so beautiful. What? John and I loved that. And when we saw that, I said, this was probably one of the things Nate had in mind. We loved that. And it was so beautiful and so neat. And it's so ethereal and talking about mood in quite a different mood from a lot of the other things that were going on, And it was just amazing. It's just
okay, like one other favorite part is when the son Junior is romancing his girl, and then they have their little musical number, and then afterwards are heading back, and the stormtroopers find them. And Junior just starts, beating them up because he's Baahubali. He can do that. And then, like, one of the soldiers recognize him and just freaks out. I was like, I'm so sorry. Please stop. Please don't kill me. We all love that bit.
Yeah.
It's great.
The scene on the snow was cool, too. There was an
avalanche. Oh, yeah. I thought that reminded me of James Bond where he just makes a sled.
Yeah. And at first I was like, how in the world is he going to get out of this, And so there's just, each bit is, because some movies have a few dramatic bits, but almost every scene was some kind of separate dramatic bit, There were a few maybe a little slightly slower bits, but not that many. They either tended to be good at one thing, like there was there was politicking going on or there was action going on. They were all pretty epic.
Oh, I love the rhythm to it because it'll have like a great scene and then slow down, kind of let you
Yeah.
breathe, and like you can get, kind of even chat about what you just watched, and then like, oh, here comes something new, and
And
it
then
had a great up and down to it.
And then you have something crazy like he sneaks in the water and tattoos the girl's hand.
Mm-hmm.
What is he doing? What is this about? He's just kind of being funny or something,
And
But
then the
it's
bit where
so
she has the
funny.
bow and he lets the snake loose.
Oh my gosh. I've lost you. There you go.
And then
Yep.
and then just the whole bit, like after that, when she hunts him down, that he's just sitting out in the forest talking to her mask.
Yeah, that was hilarious. Oh my gosh. And the whole bit of him winning her over was really good too, because she had no idea who he was when he first showed up, and convincing her that he was on her side and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'd love for the makers of this to like be put in charge of Star Wars. Just
Oh my gosh, wouldn't that be one? Because look, even if they merely made it seem, I mean, imagine they just did Star Wars kind of almost like they did this, so it was a little odd. It's not quite
Songs
the
and
right move
dance.
with songs and dance. It would still be so awesome.
I just love the thought of a stormtrooper like realizing who Luke Skywalker is, and then just like dropping to his knees, going, "Please don't hurt me."
Exactly. I mean, it had so many of those epic moments where suddenly someone recognized someone, or suddenly someone stood up for themselves, or that's what you want in an epic, delightful story. It's exactly what we would have liked to see in Star Wars. Exactly that
And
kind of
like,
storytelling.
and everything in there, pretty much matters and pays off. So
Yeah.
like Ben brought up earlier when Kadapa was talking to the merchant.
Yeah. Every scene is good in of itself, but it also comes back. Or like I mentioned before, the earlier scene where the mother is going on the circle with the fire on her head, and then we it's a setup for what we need to know when the same scene happens later, and but it's its own good scene too.
Oh, sorry,
Right.
I somehow dropped myself.
Sorry about that. I was just saying that there were many things, as you said,
Oh,
that echoed
but
back.
yeah, like with Kadapa and the merchant, first glance you're like, what does this matter? But then later on you realize that this is like showing Kadapa's skill and like explaining things about his character and
Right.
establishing, like the honor and culture of this world and everything. And
Yeah, it tells you a lot about it. Anyway,
yeah,
I probably should bow out. We've been here for a while, but I mean, I think this movie is. And so, Ben, if you ever get a chance to see the second one, you want to have a second time when we talk about this, and we can talk about more of it. Let us know, and I'll try to.
Ben, are you coming to the wedding?
Yes.
No. I'm afraid
Oh.
I had some pretty severe car expenses.
Oh.
That's right. That's right.
Kicked me in the gut. Just as I was leaving and coming back, and more car expenses when winter is over. But that's
Because if you were, I would just get a copy and bring to watch it with you.
and I appreciate the offer very much. But it's one of those things. It's like, am I gonna have to make a life change here? Am I gonna have to do this, do that? Sell drugs again? I don't know. But no,
No,
that's
just
just
sell
a
a
joke.
kidney like a normal person.
No, like who? Like that's man. Like my family genetics, like we're super resilient, but like we have the weirdest heart and kidney things that happen to us, and it's like hypertension at all times, even with medication. So it's like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna keep both kidneys right where they are. I'm not gonna drink until my organs start failing. I'm not gonna do this. I'm not gonna do that. I'm gonna preserve my heart and kidneys. Yes, because otherwise medical science would be too boring.
Hey, according to this, you can watch Baahubali 2 for $4 on Amazon Prime.
Yeah, but that's $4 I don't want to spend. I could spend that money on sandwiches. Well,
Jagi and I'll talk. Maybe we can like contribute $2
That's
each.
what I was thinking. Yeah.
no. I couldn't accept it.
You're worth at least $2 to us.
Oh, I appreciate it. But it's I'm sure that you guys can use the money on any number of other things.
Well, we'll just keep pushing it on people. And if we can get someone else to watch it all
Yes.
the way through, we'll have another one of these because there's a lot more we could discuss. I mean, you know.
Well, before you go, Jaji, I would like to know if you can ask John, like, what would be his probably favorite picks from the film.
Let me see, because he's here at the moment. Hey, handsome. Yes. So we want to know, and you can come over and talk if you want, what your favorite scenes were from Baahubali.
Can't come over and talk, but you can tell them the scene where they were on the ship.
He says the scene on the ship was his absolute favorite, the scene on the swan ship.
Called it.
Yeah, Nate says called it. It was one of the reasons he'd recommended it. Yeah, that was the one he liked best. Alrighty, guys, but I definitely think it would be nice to have another chat at, you know, whenever we have a chance to get together again on why it is that all these slightly less gruesome and sexy, slightly, I mean, you know, sex in them, slightly more story-based foreign stories, whether it's anime or this, you know, I think it'd be fun to talk about that as a subject for an hour. So Ben, whenever you want to do that, just let us know.
Oh, absolutely.
Everybody watch a different foreign movie and bring it in to discuss.
Yeah. I mean, I could talk about Chinese Paladin 3, which is like my favorite television show of all time, and you guys can, you know, bring in something you guys like from what you guys have seen, and we can talk about, and I can talk about One Piece, which is also one of my favorite things of all time.
Oh, I could talk about One Piece all day. I have the three most recent movies on Blu-ray, and it makes me sad because my laptop does not have a Blu-ray player.
Oh, that's too bad. You know, I have not seen any of the movies, and I hear some of them are really good, but some of them are hard to find. But I have been wanting to do some articles, and I haven't worked them out yet. I'd like to do some articles on writing using One Piece as an example, because it's like everything I try to tell people about writing, they have in One Piece. One Piece does it well, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But we could talk about I think we could talk about a bunch of these, not just specifically One Piece or something, but generally why these things are so good when compared to some of what's being produced from Hollywood at the moment. So I'd love to talk about that at some point.
Yeah, I think I'll probably watch Who Killed Captain Alex. Has anyone heard of that?
I have heard of that. I've heard a lot about it, and we haven't seen it. So that would be
the Ugandan film industry. I'm really kind of interested in seeing their stuff because
Pierce and April have watched it and really recommended it, and I have not seen it, but I've heard that it's amusing. So I would love to hear your take on that. So we could definitely,
I just love that Uganda's just putting in this work to create their own film industry, and I'm just like, you go, you crazy fuck, just live that dream.
Well, I tell you, you know, if Ben is going to be doing these regularly, maybe we could meet like once a month and just talk about good storytelling in foreign films and TV shows.
I'm not really willing to do like just movies.
Well, I'm just thinking movies, but you know, there's bunches of different stuff.
Yeah, and I'm more interested in like the movie's always pretty good, and Baahubali was not a waste of time in any sort of stretch of the imagination. But I'm always interested in seeing what like the shows are doing and what people are talking about. Because right now there's an interesting kerfluffle over Goblin Slayer because it has scenes of sexual abuse and rape and violence and all that.
Yes, I was looking into that.
And it's not nearly so as the anime, of course, censored things that just weren't censored in the manga. But the reaction from anyone who's read the manga or the light novels is like, what did you expect? Like, this is like 5 minutes into the manga, like, you know, page 3, you know, they're already getting started, and they skip back and forth a bit. And sort of the reactions to that and other people, how they view sort of what's coming out, their fan reactions, because there's definitely, everyone seems to like Bollywood movies. I have yet to meet somebody who says, you know what, I hate Bollywood movies with every fiber of my being.
Well, there's Bollywood movies, there's anime, and there's Chinese TV shows, of which I've watched a number, and my daughter does nothing else.
I've seen a few too.
And then there's I know there's Korean shows that are really popular, but I haven't watched any of those.
And don't forget Hong Kong.
And the Hong Kong stuff, when I talk about Chinese TV, it almost all comes out of Hong Kong. Like Chinese Paladin 3 was out of Hong Kong. Perfect
Oh, okay.
Couple, stuff like that. So that's Hong Kong stuff. And then I know that there's other things. There's a Russian movie out there that has. What's it have? That Russian movie have, John? It has Jackie Chan and Arnold in it. Yeah, we haven't seen it yet, but we've seen the ads.
What?
It's got Jackie Chan and Arnold Schwarzenegger. I think Arnold plays the villain in this crazy Russian movie.
I've not heard that. I know there was like a meme going around of a Russian movie called, if I remember correctly, The Defenders, and it was kind of like a really cheesy knockoff of the Avengers, with like a guy that turns into a bear and other crazy stuff. We had that on our to-watch list.
I've heard some decent things about it. I haven't seen it, of course, but
I've heard mixed things. But if it's bad, it's at least fun bad, from what I understand.
So the movie I'm talking about is called Journey to China, and it's got Jackie Chan playing the old wise man, and Arnold as the villain.
I like it.
And all I've seen is like trailers, but the trailers look really intriguing. They could turn out to be terrible, but they look intriguing. So I think that's it there.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, guys. Take care. All I'm saying, if you want to talk about any of these things, either specific or general, again, but I'd love to have just a time to talk about why some of these things are so good. If you guys want to get together and do that at some time at Ben's, just convenient.
Oh, I'm down. I love to take that stuff apart.
Yeah, I think I'm going to do next week. I'm going to do a stream with some filmmakers. The Evil Cow recommended to me.
Excellent.
And if she wants me to actually say her name properly, she needs to get an easier to pronounce name. Just saying. Just saying. And then I'm gonna do one like at midnight on Halloween.
That's great. Excellent.
And I'll just send out an invite so people can pay attention to it. I'll put a thing in later, and it's just going to be a red eye thing where people can chat about favorite stories.
Between her wedding and my daughter's birthday, I'm busy the beginning of November. But if you want to do anything from then on, later part of November or whatever, I would love to come back and talk about some of these topics again. So.
Oh, I haven't thought about anything past the end of October. Though I probably should, but it's a week and something away.
Yeah.
Start on it tomorrow.
Yeah. Actually, as soon as I'm done here, I'm going to work on a short story for Kursova that will have a vampire resurrecting a 9-foot giant. One of the big, sort of cryptid bones mystery things is that occasionally there's rumors of 9-foot giant bones found in caves around California. Wow. So the vampire is being pursued by a Templar knight who was kicked out of the Vatican for beheading some cardinal or whatever, and the joke is that he was a vampire. We were exorcising him, joke. But so they're going to do a fight, and the vampire is going to transform himself into a giant wolf. The giant can ride, and they're going to do battle all over the streets of LA, and then the vampire is going to slink away because, of course, no one thinks about the evil steed that the villain is riding. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be working on.
Sounds good. All right, guys, I gotta go. Thank you so much. Bye.
See you, Jagi.
You're welcome. See you guys sometime, I guess. All right, and thank you guys for listening. Next week, I'm going to have these filmmakers on, and it's all going to be great.
Which film? Oh, go ahead. You can go ahead and end the live stream.